Hello, and welcome to another Pressing In. My name is Jeremy, and as you can see, we are doing this a little differently. We're doing it through a video online chat format. We felt like going forward, this was kind of the simplest, easiest, and maybe most compliant way to continue producing the content we want to produce. Because here at Pressing In, our hope and desire is to start this conversation with leaders and from around Blue Ridge to help us wrestle with and apply the content that we're learning on a Sunday morning to the rest of our day and the rest of our lives. So again, thanks for being here. This is the way you can expect to see this going forward. Guys, thanks for making time to be a part of this discussion. And like we've said, we want Pressing In just to be a time where we're all having a discussion that others can be a part of and others here, where we're taking what we're talking about on a Sunday morning and wrestling with that. And so that together as a community of faith, we can apply it to the rest of our lives throughout the week. So I want to start off by reading from 1 Corinthians 9, Woody, where you ended up in your talk, that I think where Paul really summarizes for us the whole thing that you were saying about this training versus trying. He says in verse 25, all athletes are disciplined in their training. They do it to win a prize that will fade away, but we do it for an eternal prize. So I run with purpose in every step. I am not just shadow boxing. I discipline my body like an athlete, and here it is, training it to do what it should. I loved that phrase that you were using throughout this whole process of this idea of training versus trying, this idea that we get to train ourselves rather than just try harder to live the lives that Jesus is inviting us to live. And so obviously the primary application was what's transformed and changed your life, Woody, was this whole idea of chair time. Chair time being the central picture of a training ground to live the life that Jesus is inviting us to live. So actually, I want to start with you, Woody, and I want to ask the question, when you think about a chair time, I know it's evolved for you through the years, specifically a lot in this last 5 years, but what do you remember your earliest memories being about a chair time-ish kind of practice?
Some of you heard my story, how I came to Christ, and I was at a missionary conference of all things. It was a group called InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, a campus ministry. And that was part of their whole tradition. And so even at the conference that week, they would set apart a time and they ask you to do that in the conference itself. So that was probably the first time in my life I ever had a quiet time. But from the very beginning, 50 years ago, and we called them quiet times. In fact, you could look at my notes and it'd be QT. And what we do with quiet times, and there were books, and over the years, I have tried virtually everything, all sorts of aids. And it's taken different forms, but it had sort of died on the vine until 3, 4, 5 years ago. Well, maybe, yes. I don't know exactly how long, 5 or 6 years ago. And that out of that desperation came a need that this has got to be different, because I knew that it was important, and these were activities that Jesus did. They're activities that people through the centuries who have walked with God, they all exercised these particular activities that, they all were in training. And so I knew it was important. It just wasn't working for me.
Mm-hmm. What about for you, Steve? What do you remember? What are some of your earliest memories of a chair time being modeled, or who first encouraged you? Where did it first start to take root in your journey with God?
Yeah. My parents divorced when I was 11. And what I saw in my mom was her turning towards God, really out of her own desperation. And so she was really the first person to model what it was like to look to God, to look to his word, to spend that time. I remember just looking through her Bible at times and seeing it all marked up, and she had notes and everything else. Now, I didn't become a follower of Jesus until I was 21. And really, in my own kind of evolution, if you will, of this quiet time, as Woody says, there was that initial excitement and everything, but it became more of a duty than it was a desire. And it continued that way for a long time, really up until I'd say about 12 years ago, when my life really began to spin out of control. And we really went through a season, my family, my wife, we went through a season of hardships. God really used that to turn my attention to him again in a way that caused me to really have to decide if I was going to learn to depend on his word. And then probably about 5 years ago, when Woody first started mentioning about chair time, is kind of this next season of my life where, for me personally, it's taken more growth in my life and really become very personal for me in the way that I spend time with God.
Mm-hmm. Peggy, I know that for those that are familiar with your story, you became a follower of Jesus well into adulthood. You just self-described good girl for you're even before being a follower of Jesus. Where do you first remember, or who first encouraged you, or how did you start to move towards this place of time with God, what we now call a chair time?
For me, I think it was a long process. I don't have any specific memories of starting a quiet time. I really don't. I think probably what happened is Woody certainly encouraged me. My beginning, as a lot of you know, I was in the book of John with Woody and my husband. It's called the Encounter Group now. And so I was in the book of John. And so my thought would be, that would be my time with God, whether it's during the encounter group with Woody and my husband, or looking at John ahead of time. So maybe I would know something. It was a long process to get where I am right now in understanding what that looks like to really sit with God.
Yeah. For me, my earliest memories, and again, those that are familiar with my story know that, my mom really fully surrendering when I was somewhere around second or third grade, and our life moving from a place of chaos to completely transformed was a huge moment. But I think what I saw after that moment, when we started to attend church services and things like that, was I saw her engaging every morning. My earliest memories be like 5 o'clock in the morning, and you'd wake up and you'd see this warm light out in the living room glowing from your bedroom, and you knew what was happening, that my mom was sitting in her regular place in this chair. She had the same lamp on that would be on next to her. She had this Bible in this brown leather Bible case. She had I don't remember what they're exactly called. It's not a legal notepad, but it's a smaller notepad with a red line down the middle. I think that stenographers used, or for shorthand they wrote on. That was kind of her prayer journal, things like that. And I remember you could hear her voice praying in the morning. You would hear the room was so quiet, the house would be so quiet that you'd hear the change of the pages, things like that. You could go. I'd go through, kind of like you, Steve. I would go through later in the day. Every now and again, I would look through her Bible, and you'd see the highlights of things, and it became a very early memory of mine. Now, even so I want my kids to have the same memory of me. Is a very early memory of this time set aside with God leads to transformation and change. And I didn't even know how true that was. It just was experientially what I saw modeled early on. So for us, fast forwarding, like I said, we've all kind of alluded to it, that it's a journey with a chair time, that it's not just like you immediately know what to do. It's like, a baby learning to crawl, then toddle around, and then walk, and then run. So these things evolve and grow and mature through the years. And I think they've all done that in our lives. Would you describe just what's a normal chair time for you all right now? What does that look like? Steve, I'll start with you.
It's funny because I really don't think I have a normal. That is, I get up every day at 5. And I love the quiet and the stillness of the mornings. And I just love how life kind of awakens at that time when I'm spending alone with God. I think as in any relationship, sometimes, relationships are, I'll just say forward facing. That is, sometimes you're spending time looking at one another and sometimes you're side by side. In my walk with God, I get up and I go as I feel led. So sometimes it is spent in a lot of prayer. It's always spent in His Word, sometimes doing devotionals, journaling, reading other books. Sometimes I'll go out and I'll light a fire and I'll just spend that time alone with Him. It's worshiping. The thing that chair time did for me is it made me intentional about kind of saying, okay, I'm going to set aside an hour of my day. Now, sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more, but that time is just really spent, like I said, just following the leading of the Spirit. So normal is hard for me to categorize, but the way that time is spent is always really valuable and precious.
So normal, as you would say it, is there's a set aside time.
Yes.
It's an intentional time of listening for God's voice in multiple facets.
Yes.
Through whether prayer, scripture, silence, it may be different aspects of worship, but the normalcy is the time and the space.
Yes, for sure.
That's good. Love that. Peggy, what about for you?
For me, like I said, it was quite a journey. I can remember, doing my chair time, or back then quiet time, like reading scripture, checking stuff off. And then I remember the warnings of don't do this if you're just checking a box. And then I realized, wait a minute, no, go ahead and check the box because there's obedience in this and there's discipline in this. But I knew it wasn't supposed to stay just that. So I can remember, 10 years ago, maybe more, I can remember the thought of how much intentionality do I put into my time with God? If I'm going to have a date with my husband, there's thought, there's intentionality, there's a plan, there's excitement. And I had no intentionality as far as my time other than it's the same place and the same time. So I started thinking about that and I didn't like that. And so I remember just sitting down one morning at my kitchen table and saying, Lord, if you were here, and then I realized actually you are, what would you like to do today? And so it kind of started kind of awkward with me on that. But then it resembles what Steve was talking about. Scripture would always be a part of it, but I would sometimes get up and walk outside and be with God in nature, whether I'm listening to scripture or just quoting what I could remember. Sometimes I would get on my knees in my living room and listen to worship music. But it was always, God, what would you have us do now? And then often remembering, and this was hard for me in the beginning, remembering that even if I don't feel anything, I've honored God by giving Him my time. That it's not about a feeling. That was big for me. It's not about feeling God all the time. He doesn't have to let me feel Him all the time. And sometimes it's just, Lord, I pray that during this time you've been worshiped. So it was quite a journey for me to get to that point.
I love that question of, God, what do you want? Like, what do you want this time to be today? I think some of the drier moments in chair times is when I am just when I'm not at least asking that question. He may lead me to the same place, but when I'm just doing a duty rather than inviting Him into it in the sense of saying, God, I'm showing up here and I don't feel like it, but that question I think is a powerful question. God, what do you want this to be? So that we are inviting Him to shape it and change it and mold it into what He desires in that season. That's huge. Love that. Woody, what about you? Obviously, we've heard you talk a lot about this in recent years, which is good. I think it's really good for us to continue to hear it because I think it's so core and so easy for us to push aside in life. And so what's a normal chair time for you?
That's the analogy, I think, with the physical training is a good one. You don't just focus on the training as such. You're not just checking a box. There is discipline in the whole thing. But you do start it with, I started with a couple of questions, I guess, fundamental questions is, okay, who is this for? Is it for me or is it for God? And you start with the end in mind. Who do you want to be? How do you want to treat God? I guess with physical discipline, that would be true as well. If you just do it to do push-ups, I don't know how long that would last, but you want to get to a certain state. You want to be in a certain physical shape. You want to be able to climb the mountains or whatever. So I think that's part of it. And again, like the physical discipline training, I think you exercise different muscle groups, or you look at what you want to do and then you design it around that. And so, again, it sort of falls back into certain things that are fundamental. We've mentioned, as listen to the other folks, the meat and potatoes of it will be things like scripture and prayer. I mean, if I were starting, I'd say, what do you enjoy? And for me, it would be, I like to read different stuff. And so that's been a regular part of mine. I started by prayer, and then I'll usually go to something. Sometimes I'll just read, Outreach magazine or something like that, see what's happening and what I can learn from that. Sometimes I have a rule that for a very general rule, that for every modern author I read an old dead one. And like what we're doing, with the reading plan. And so I try to mix and match that. Journaling is a discipline for me. It's not something I enjoy doing, but I do it virtually every day. I kind of finish up with that, reflecting on what I've learned, that sort of thing. Every now and then I will do, I'll listen to music, but scripture will be in there. Just recently, in the last few days, I pulled out an old set of 3x5 cards that I used years and years and years and years ago. They were in the back of my drawer in my desk. And probably 100 verses that I had memorized. And so I started going through them. There's one in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, and I just sort of meditated on that, chewed on like a cow chews on a cud. And it's really informed. It's where I am right now. And so sometimes it's reading broader swaths of scripture. It's reading a whole book or whatever. As I said, memorization, asking God to give me a passage that I can dig into here. And so, there's a variety in it. I think that's one of the things that helps it not become just rote and check a box kind of thing.
Woody, I love what you said. The staples are scripture and prayer. But what would you guys say to someone like that to say, okay, scripture and prayer is going to be a part of this in some way or another. What's something you guys have added or that has been recently meaningful to you that just impacted you? God used in a very specific way. I know kind of combining several questions here. And so I may be surprising. So if one of you want to volunteer to go first, that would be great.
I think this whole, what I said earlier is you started with kind of who do you want to be rather than just a set of activities. Look at your life, and at this point, what is it in your life that brings energy and closeness to God? What is it that excites you or that you would look forward to doing when you get up in the morning or whenever, whatever it looks like? And so that would probably be one place that I would start. But at the same time, you've got to commit to it. You've got to figure who you want to be, and then you've got to commit to a process that will cause you to become that, and realizing it will take time, it will take discipline, but just like physical exercise, it will allow you to do and to be the person you want to be.
What about for one of you two?
For me, I'm trying to, I guess I'm listening to you guys and realizing I guess I put a lot on discipline and commitment. for me, and I'm trying to think, I have talked to new Christ followers, couple of things. And now this is not new in my life, but it's a regular occurrence. I can be walking through my kitchen and getting ready to go to my chair time and look at scripture and think, I don't want to read that. And I'm like, okay, that is not from God. So I pick up scripture and I'm going to read extra today. So that type of, no, that's not from God. Also, I remember Woody teaching me this over and over again, that scripture is alive. It will transform my mind. So that means, if that's true, and it is, that me reading it, I'm being transformed. My mind is being transformed like Jesus. Mm-hmm. And just, do I believe that? And sometimes I have to say, forgive my unbelief. Because it seems like if I believed that there'd be a whole lot more of that going on. So these are the kind of things that I go through. And I share with new Christ followers and trust him. Do it. Start doing it for a little while. See what he will do in that surrender of your time.
Awesome. Steve, what about you?
Yeah. So there's a couple thoughts I have, and this is to kind of piggyback on Woody's message about intention. John Ortberg talked about wish, want, intend, that you can wish for something to change, you can want something to change, but until you intend to do it, nothing's going to change at all. But then I think about Andy Stanley, and he said, direction, not intention, determines our destination. And I think that, for a new follower or somebody struggling, much to what Woody is saying about think about the end, think about the direction that you want to go. And that may mean that you need to make some directional changes in your life so that you can get to the place that you really desire. If you desire a deeper relationship with Jesus, then we may have to make some changes in order to see that happen. I also think, as I've just listened to us today, a lot of it, I think people can get stuck in just the ritual part of it. And what I hear from all of us today is mix it up. You can't put God in a box. Use that time to seek him out in different ways. And also share that with somebody else, meaning, just as in physical training, when two people are doing it together, they're probably going to advance a lot further than one person doing it alone. And so maybe just share that with somebody else about what you're doing and ask them what they're doing. And I think those things together may help people to go further and deeper in their relationship with Jesus.
Love it, guys. And I do think a theme, even though we, like Peggy pointed out, we would probably all be on different spectrums as far as just obedience and in the rule follower-ish and all those kind of things. But I do think that setting aside purposeful time, asking God what he wants it to look like. I love a question my mom asked when she started moving towards God. She looked at my sister and me, and she looked at her life, and she said, she played it out forward and said, if I keep on down this same path, my kids are going to be exactly who I am. And that caused her to start to go, what do I need to add intentionally into my life? For her, it was just starting to attend church, a church service kind of idea at that moment before Christ. But I think that would be one of the questions. Who do I want to become? Like, who do I want to be? Because Christ has the power to change and transform me into a version that I can't even truly imagine of myself. And so asking that question, wrestling with it, and then adjusting our times with him to fit what that's supposed to look like, I think is all huge. So awesome, guys. I know we could keep on talking, but for sake of time, and I want other people to be having these conversations. This was just meant to get the conversation started. So Peggy, would you pray for people that are watching this and will be listening and be wrestling through this?
God, I am so grateful. Just even sitting here and remembering was special for me, to remember how you guided and directed me, Lord, remembering that you are who you say you are, and that you do promise as we come before you, you will transform. You will do what you need to do in us, God. You never leave us where we are, and you are so worth our time, Lord. So please, God, for everybody that's listening, if we could just stop for a moment and ask you, Lord, to change our hearts in this, wherever it needs to be changed, or our minds, that you would give us that bit of a desire, Lord, to maybe start something new with you and see what you might do. I would love that. And I pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all.